everyone, welcome back to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you're new to my channel, my name is Melissa and I'm a nursing student. Thank you so much to everybody who has recently subscribed to my channel. If you are not yet subscribed and you enjoy the content on my channel, please hit the subscribe button. So if you have not seen my previous videos, then you may or may not know that I attend Chamberlain University. I attend their evening and weekend BSN program. So it's not a bridge program. I don't have a license. I'm not a registered nurse. I'm doing an accelerated BSN program to get my bachelor's in nursing. And then after I'm done with the program, I will be sitting for my board exam, the NCLEX, and I will become a registered nurse. So I do have different clinical rotations, and so far I have completed 2 clinical rotations. I've completed Fundamentals of Patient Care, and I have completed Adult Health 1, which is MedSurg. Now Chamberlain is a little bit different since it's an accelerated program. We do not have 16-week semesters. We have condensed 8-week sessions. And so for Adult Health, which is also known as MedSurg, we have 2 sessions. So there's Adult Health 1, which is 8 weeks, and then we have Adult Health 2, which is also 8 weeks. So once you combine them, by the end, I will have taken a full semester of MedSurg, or a full 16 weeks of MedSurg, just like a program that is not accelerated. So far, I have finished Adult Health 1, and so I'm going to tell you what it is like to do clinicals in MedSurg on a MedSurg unit. So first off, MedSurg or Adult Health, I'm going to be using them interchangeably just because I don't know what other schools call it. At Chamberlain, it's called Adult Health, but we all, like all the students, refer to it as MedSurg because it is MedSurg. So I don't know what they call it at other schools. So if you hear me using Adult Health or MedSurg, they're the exact same thing. And I will start off by saying that Adult Health or MedSurg clinicals are very different than Fundamentals clinicals. So I took Fundamentals first, everybody does, and Fundamentals of Patient Care really focuses on the fundamentals of patient care. So we learned how to insert an NG tube, a nasogastric tube. We learned how to give a bed bath. We learned proper hand hygiene and how to apply PPE. We learned how to insert and remove an indwelling catheter. We learned the basics of wound care. Like, it's all the fundamentals of nursing, which is why it's called Fundamentals of Patient Care. So Fundamentals really was focused on bedside manners, introducing yourself to the patient and their family member, letting them know who you are when you walk into the room. Taking vitals was a huge thing that I did. I helped assist patients to the bathroom, just anything like that. It was really basic stuff. So that was Fundamentals. I know this video is not about fundamentals, but I went into that little mini deep dive just to show you or tell you the differences between Fundamentals and MedSurg. In MedSurg, you're still doing all of those things, of course. You're going to continue doing them all throughout your program. But now we are administering medication. We're learning how to provide education to patients. We're really learning how to think critically. We're incorporating pathophysiology into our clinicals, looking at a patient's symptoms and trying to figure out what is going on with them, figuring out the nursing diagnosis. It is a lot more high yield than the Fundamentals clinical. This is the first class where you are actually administering medication versus back in Fundamentals, we weren't. We couldn't even touch it. We could barely look at it. I'm kidding, we could look at it. But we didn't do anything at all with medications, and that's because most of us, myself included, were taking Fundamentals of Patient Care and pharmacology congruently. So we're taking them both at the same time. And you cannot pass medications in the hospital until you have passed or successfully completed pharmacology. So anything from oral medication, IV medication, even topical medication like ointments and stuff like that. All of the medication that was administered, I had to do it with my professor being there. So even though I was shadowing a nurse every week, if the nurse was like, here, do you want to administer this medication? I had to be like, no, let me go grab my clinical instructor. My clinical instructor has to be there for it. And that's just in case anything goes wrong. You won't get in trouble and your school won't get in trouble. I got to do real health assessments on patients, so I actually got to use my stethoscope and I got to auscultate bowel sounds, lung sounds, heart sounds, which is actually fun. I got to help with neuro checks on patients that required neuro checks frequently. I actually got to witness, obviously I didn't do it because this is like more serious, but I got to witness a blood transfusion. So everything from receiving the order, going down to the lab to actually like get the blood, watching them do patient verification, going back up to the unit and seeing the blood transfusion being administered. I thought that was so cool. I got to do all of that this session while I was doing MedSurg. In MedSurg, you're also doing AccuChecks and checking patients' like blood sugar levels, and you're really looking through the patient's chart. I know in fundamentals we were looking through patients' charts, but in MedSurg I feel like I was actually looking, versus back in fundamentals I feel like I was kind of browsing and just getting a feel for the system. And now in this class I'm actually looking and searching for patient information that can be applied in my clinicals. So it's just like fundamentals, but just like a couple steps up with medication administration. At least for me, my MedSurg clinicals were actually 12 hours versus fundamentals, which were 8 hours. I know in Chamberlain, some of the clinical courses require 12-hour clinicals, while others require 8-hour clinicals. The 12-hour clinicals are really, really, really long, and we stayed in clinical the entire time, every single week. And it was so long. But clinicals for MedSurg apparently require more clinical hours than fundamentals did. So as for my personal experience doing clinicals on a MedSurg unit, I will say I have now worked on 2 different MedSurg units in 2 different hospitals. So every time that you do a clinical rotation at Chamberlain, you have to sign up every session to do a new course or do a new clinical rotation, and there's no guarantee that you are going to get the same clinical site or the same hospital that you were at before. It depends on what is available, what you're able to get into, what classes you're taking, etc. I actually had the opportunity to go to the same clinical site and work on the same unit that I did last session for fundamentals, but I purposely chose a different clinical site. And that was for 2 reasons. Number 1 was because last session when I was doing fundamentals, my clinical site was actually in a different state. If you've seen my previous videos, then you probably know that I attend the Tyson's Corner campus of Chamberlain. That is in Northern Virginia. So the area that I live in is the DC metropolitan area. So my area encompasses Northern Virginia, parts of Maryland, and DC, Washington, DC. So school for me, I have to cross state lines because I live in Maryland and school is in Virginia. Since we're in the tri-state area, there are clinical sites in Washington, DC, in Maryland, and in Virginia. So my clinical site last session was in Virginia, so it was quite a drive. And even though I enjoyed it, I love the hospital, I love the staff that I was at, or the staff that I worked with at the hospital, it was just really far. So I knew before clinical sites even became available, I was just like, I don't want to go to Virginia anymore. I want to stay in Maryland. If there's a clinical site in Maryland, I'm going to sign up for it. And I was lucky, and there were a few different clinical sites in Maryland, so I just picked one of them. So I've now had the opportunity to work on 2 different MedSurg units in 2 different hospitals, which was the second reason why I picked a different clinical site. My idea was that, like, going into clinicals, I said to myself, I want to try to work in as many different hospitals and on as many different units as possible, just because I don't want to have completed nursing school and said that I've only worked on like maybe 2 different units or at 2 different hospitals. I wanted to graduate nursing school and be able to say that, like, yeah, I've worked in like half of different hospitals and I've been all over the place, and I wanted to get a wide range of experience. And so with that being said, I'm not going to name either of my clinical sites, 1 for safety reasons, and 2 just because I don't want to say anything badly about either hospital, because both hospitals were really nice. I definitely had a significantly better experience at one hospital versus the other. And just for me personally, I know that MedSurg gets a bad reputation, at least from what I've heard. Everybody that I know, literally, I do not know any nursing students or any new nurses who have told me that they would want to work on a MedSurg unit. Everyone I know wants to go to other areas of nursing. And when you even mention MedSurg, like, the attitude is kind of like, I don't want to work there. I don't want to work there. I will say that the one clinical site where I had a positive experience, I would totally work there. I would totally work on the MedSurg unit. I actually, like, I'm looking at the different specialties that I would work in. I don't know what specialty I'd want to work in. I'm open to anything at this point except for geriatrics and pediatrics right now, but I'm open to anything. And I didn't think MedSurg would be where I would be curious about, but after working on that first unit, I would totally work in MedSurg, and I would totally work there. And then at least at Chamberlain, every single week you have to do documentation. So they're called CLEs, which are clinical learning something evaluation. I don't know, but we had to do clinical work. So after we were in the clinical for 12 hours or on site for 12 hours, then we got to go home and do more paperwork. But the paperwork was actually applicable to what we were doing in clinical. It wasn't just kind of like random busy work. Like every week we had to complete an IS bar, which is something that we're actually going to be doing on the field. So I didn't mind that too much. We had to do a 60-second assessment where we go into a patient's room and we do a quick 1-minute scan, just looking for anything unusual or just taking any notes, like is there anything on the floor that the patient could trip on? Are there any environmental issues? Is the patient on oxygen? Does the patient have an IV? It's just to get us in the habit of going into the room and immediately like looking for things that we should be taking note of. That was also something else that I didn't mind. All in all, the clinical documentation, in my opinion, like the documentation or the coursework that goes along with clinical, does not feel like busy work to me because it actually feels applicable to the clinical site, so I personally don't mind it. We also had something called a sim lab, which is a simulation lab. So we had 8 weeks of clinical. One of those weeks we were not in the hospital. We actually went to school and we did something called the sim lab. So every campus has a sim lab or a simulation lab. For MedSurg, we had a mannequin, like one of those high-tech mannequins, and we went into the simulated patient room, so it looked like a hospital room. We had the mannequin that was laying in the bed, and the mannequin had a condition, a critical care condition. So we went into the patient's room, a timer was set, and we had no idea what we were walking into. We got like a really quick debriefing, almost like nurses giving a report. So we got some background on our patient and what they were going through, and then we went into the room and the simulation happened. And when I say we went into the room, I mean me and my classmates. So not my whole cohort, but my clinical group. So there were 6 of us in total, including myself. It was pretty small. All 6 of us went into the room, and the patient immediately had something going on with them, and it was critical, and we had to figure it out and provide appropriate care in like a very condensed amount of time. I'm not going to get into details at all what was going on with the patient, just in case people are watching this video that have not gotten to that point yet. I don't want to spoil it for you. We're going to continue to have simulation labs throughout the program, but this was the first class where we actually had a sim lab. And that was just a quick run through of what MedSurg was like, at least for me. If you have any questions, as always, please comment down below. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.